David Grasso is on the line with us this morning. He's in Houston, Texas, where today's high temperature is expected to be about 100.
Oh, 98, 99, 100, depending on what the gods say today. This is why snowbirds go your way in the summer and they come my way in the winter. Makes a lot of sense.
There you go. If you happen to have wings, then that would be a really good thing. Unfortunately, the political situation where you are in Texas, and now it's spreading all across the United States, is, some lawmakers, they took wing just a couple of weeks ago and left the entire state of Texas to avoid a vote on redistricting. And now they're back, and that passed, I believe it was last night. And because of all of that, now it's headed for court. The redistricting question has become a really hot topic all across the United States, and we want to talk about that with David today. Our visit is presented by Marcus & Mack, voted best law firm and best personal injury lawyer 4 years in a row in the Best of Indiana County contest. Visit them online at marcusandmack.com. David is a political analyst. We've had him on with us before. David, tell me about this. Why has this suddenly become such a hot topic?
Because we have a closely divided Congress, and this is an easy power grab. I think everyone's been pretty transparent about that. We call this gerrymandering. Basically going back to the Great Compromise of 1787, every state got 2 senators, but the House, or the House of Representatives, is really apportioned by population. And those assignments are done by the census every 10 years. Well, it's 2025. We're in between censuses. So this is highly unusual. And basically what it's doing is trying to set up Republicans for a better midterm. Of course, here in Texas, that request was made by none other than President Donald Trump, who wants to make sure he doesn't lose control of Congress after the midterms.
Well, as somebody my son is a huge fan of politics, and about 10 years ago, we actually made the trip to Elbridge Gerry's grave in Washington, D.C. in the Congressional Cemetery because he wanted to see it. It does go back all that distance, all those many decades and now centuries, and it's a huge issue because of what the ramifications are. In terms of the way the Congress is set up right now. But David, aren't we also then setting it up for the next legislative battle that comes along, and then it just becomes, all right, I'm going to retaliate with my vote here, and you're going to retaliate with your vote here, and does it ever end?
No, it doesn't end. And, the reason why it's called gerrymandering is his last name was Gary, but we changed it to Jerry, and then his district looked like a salamander. So if you want to know a little bit of the word usage and where it comes from, I'm sure you already knew this, but for your audience, that's where it comes from. The problem is when politicians choose their voters instead of voters choose their politicians, they don't really have competitive elections. So they behave very differently. There's a few things that happen. They don't really care what their constituents think. And additionally, they have no incentive to be bipartisan whatsoever. And that's where a lot of the extremism comes from. This morning, the number one question I've gotten is what happens to Jasmine Crockett, who is, of course, very famous here in Texas and elsewhere because of her social media presence. Well, there's going to be more Jasmine Crockett's and Marjorie Taylor Greenes under this system because they're in districts that will be fine. They're going to be safe. They're not competitive. And like anything else, you think about it in the private sector. When you have a plush job and a boss that isn't really, overseeing your work, a lot of people just become lazy and do the minimum.
Yeah. Now in Texas, of course, you're gaining seats all the time, and here in Pennsylvania, we seem to lose a seat or two every 10 years when the census comes through. And we recall just a few years ago when the redistricting map was put out, and automatically the 2 Republican districts were forced to have 2 Republican congressmen battling each other in the primary. That district went away, one of those districts, and so one congressman who was a Republican was out. Courts redrew Pennsylvania's legislative map. They said it just wasn't right. That's an issue that still hasn't gone away here in Pennsylvania. Are courts going to decide ultimately what happens with this case overall and with Texas's case in particular?
The courts will likely hold this up here in Texas, but there are different rules by state. Like in California, basically there is a voter-passed initiative that says they should have fair districts. In fact, my home state of Florida has a similar initiative. So every single state is different. But in general, these types of measures benefit Republicans because Republicans tend to live in suburbs, exurbs, rural areas, so they're geographically larger. Now, this is an important caveat that is rarely covered. Just because here in Texas or in other states that you set Republicans up for a better situation in the next election doesn't necessarily mean they're going to win. There's a lot of other variables like the economy, inflation, et cetera, that could derail efforts to keep the majority in Congress.
And people are moving from one state to another in order to bolster the polling ranks within each of their new states. And that can change the entire demographic as well. Florida is a big example of that.
Yeah, well, right now we have this strange situation where Americans, especially in their golden years, are moving to warmer climates. And I would say, as a lifelong Floridian until recently, a lot of Pennsylvanians, quote unquote, live there, but they don't really live there. They go back to Pennsylvania all the time. But for political purposes, they are our own now, and they have turned Florida more red. But I guarantee you, your people over there who spend the winter in Florida are home right now. Mm-hmm. So we have this dynamic situation specifically because of the baby boomers and because there's such a large generation that they are having huge political impact on our system right now, which will go away in the next 20 years as they go away themselves.
You mentioned Elbridge Gerry's district of Massachusetts and the salamander shape of when you looked at the map of what that was like. Here in Pennsylvania, it was a lot like that as well. When the legislature tried to redraw the maps, there were, you look at things and you say, this is naturally the geographic way that we should look at a congressional district. However, in order to shape it the way that certain legislators wanted it to be shaped, it looked really crazy. And that's the kind of thing that we're trying to avoid, correct?
Yeah, but apparently we're going the opposite way on that. It seems like everyone's going to be gerrymandered everywhere because, we're doing the kindergarten argument. Both parties are not on the high moral ground. They started it first. Obama already came out and said California should do it. So, we're headed towards lots of salamanders everywhere and all sorts of crazy creatures on a map, drawings that do not resemble, nature or any sort of normal, fair district, which is, I believe, what most Americans of both parties would want.
Is it going to take state constitutions to be adjusted in order to stop this madness?
I don't know what will stop this madness because we have a situation where we have red and blue states and people are self-sorting. If you're a Republican, you're more likely to move to Texas or Florida. If you're a Democrat, you're more likely to move to Illinois and California. So no one's going to say, well, this is the right thing to do because it just decreases their representation in Washington. So I think we're moving towards a hardening of this system and it's just going to spread everywhere.
Wow. And I wanted hopeful news from you, David. You're not giving it to me.
And it's just reality. I live in the world. I didn't create it. I'm just here to report the facts.
Reality can really slap you down a little bit. This is, it's depressing news that this is the way that things are headed, and doesn't seem like there's anything that can slow the momentum. Yeah,
well, and I would. A word of caution to both parties who do this. They're going to have crazy disenfranchised activists going insane over this. I mean, take Ohio. Ohio is only 55% Republican. It's 45% Democrat. And it's all heavily gerrymandered in Republicans' favors. And the same thing in California. There's a lot of Republicans in California. That is grotesquely misreported. I lived in California. My cousins are Republican. If you go to Inland Empire, California, 50 miles east of LA, it's very conservative. So this whole idea that people will feel unrepresented has serious consequences for our system, and we will be hearing from them more in the near future.
Yeah, there's a feeling in Pennsylvania that no matter what the rest of the state wants, Philadelphia basically controls the entire political system. So yeah, every state has issues such as that. David Grasso, you've helped us to understand what's going on with this situation, and as frightening as it is, it'll work itself out. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Have a great day.